Hey everybody, welcome back into the booth. This is Josh Risser here with another short story narration. Today we've got a cute little short story, and it's little, called Lost and Found by John Kendrick Bangs. This is the winner, maybe not the winner, maybe it was second place, I don't remember. It was someplace, should have checked, of a short story contest, and then it was published in a magazine. And I don't know much about the author, I don't know much about the short story, I just came across it, and it is super short, but it was interesting because it has what I like to call like letters home in it. It is actually a correspondence of 3 or 4 letters. Actually, just pull up the script. So this is the script, Lost and Found by John Kendrick Bangs. And we have basically the narrator, Bagby, Harrison Bagby. He's realized something now that he's left this vacation, and he sends a letter, and he receives a letter, and then he sends a letter back. So we just have 3 quick letters. And like I said, I like to call these letters to home. I had this idea about how a letter sounds in your head. I don't know if you also have this same idea. I'm sure the idea came from a commercial where there's a kid writing home to their mom. I have this idea in my head where it's like, "Dear Mom, summer camp has been wonderful. You wouldn't believe all the great things we did." And the sound of the internal dialogue talking to someone else in a letter is a very particular sound that I can't always nail, but I've got this image in my head. And so I don't know, let me know in the comments if you also think, maybe if you know what I'm talking about. So what we're going to do is we're going to narrate this. The first part is narration with a little bit of dialogue and a sentence that means something different these days than it probably did when this was written. But that's what you get when you look at these stuff from the early 1900s. There's a few things we have to be aware of before we get into this. We have to know where the letters start and end, and that's pretty obvious. We can see the address at the top. So these letters start with an address and then a date, but the date is vague. It's August something something of 1900 and something. Well, you don't want to say that. You have to make this decision before you start narrating. What am I going to put in place of these? I'm just going to say August of 1900. Or, let's see, so this first one, the Mossmere, New York, August 1900. Yeah, that's what I'll say. So, the Mossmere, New York, August of 1900. Seacliff, August of 1900. And then New York, August of 1900. Then we have the openings. My dear Mrs. Shelton. So we have to think we have one guy writing to Mrs. Shelton, and then my dear Mr. Bagby. So I'll just kind of pitch up the voice a little bit and not try to overdo the feminine voice. We just know that there is a female writing back to Harrison Bagby named Mary Shelton. We can also see there are section markers in the script. We have 1, 2, and 3. Typically, these would be bigger in like a chapter. So it'd be like chapter 1. Chapter 2, Chapter 3. I might just say 1, 2, 3 for them because, I don't know, they're not really chapters, they're sections, but I don't really want to say section. They're more like scenes, I guess. All right, now we have Reaper. We're ready to go. Project is set up. Oh, and one thing I want to show you might have seen. I have in my hands, let me just get a little closer for you. A dog clicker. Goes like this. Great for training dogs, also great for noting errors in voiceover. I wanted to run over this real quick because this is a tool I use often when I'm editing my own narration and I'm not doing punch and roll. Sometimes you get in a groove and you don't want to stop and restart and stop and restart and stop and restart. And so you can use something like a dog clicker to make very obvious notations in your recording of where you made a mistake. So you don't have to play engineer and director and voice talent all at the same time. You can scrap engineer, hit record, you know it's recording, and then you just do it. I'm going to use the dog clicker to walk you through the process for the first couple of paragraphs here. So every time I make a mistake, I'm going to click. I don't know exactly what that's going to sound like to you, but you'll see. Let's pop over to Reaper real quick. You can see in Reaper up here we've got a spike. Whoa, dropped it. I dropped it. Okay, starting over. Here in Reaper, we clear that out. You can see it'll spike. Actually, let me just roll, and I'll show you what it looks like. So we're rolling. You can hear my voice. You see just regular waveforms for my voice. The spectral stuff at the bottom, which maybe we'll talk about spectral editing later. But anyway, we can click, and you see it creates a double spike. It's because of click in, click out. Now, those are very obvious in this waveform. So if we stop recording and I'm going back, I can see these mistakes very, very easily. So what I'm going to do is use those clicks to edit. And I'm not going to stop rolling for at least the first couple of paragraphs here. So delete that garbage, get into the script, and let's roll, and we'll see what happens. And I'll use the dog clicker. Hopefully I make some mistakes. I'm sure I will, because it's early 1900 English, not the same as now English. All right, opening first, and then into the first section. Lost and Found by John Kendrick Bangs. Narrated by Josh Risser. 1. The weekend was over, and Begbie had returned to town restless and strangely unhappy. There was within him a curious sense of something lost, and yet, now and then, the intimation of another something that seemed to be gain wholly. Weird words. All right. The intimation of another something that seemed to be gain wholly would flash across the horizon of his reflection. Another something that seemed to be gain wholly. Begin. I'm going to go with begin. I have a feeling that seemed to begin wholly would flash across. I'm going to go with that. Who knows? Feel like if you know what he's saying here, let me know. But since we got some mistakes, let's also do some editing. So pop on the headphones. I got to hear it too, right? Okay, so we can see I made 2 mistakes here. This last one actually is total trash. So, and yet, now and then, and yet, so what you would typically do is you would find, okay, we picked up at and yet, and right here, there was within him a curious, and right here, and yet, okay, so you can highlight this stuff. I have a shortcut key to delete these sections. So basically you split the sections, so now you can see that. And then you can delete that out, and then you can tighten it up. And so, a curious sense of something lost. And yet, and then over here, there was within him, just boom, and here's my shortcut key, pushes it all together for me. So, also nice, and strangely unhappy. So, what we're going to do for this line, the intimation of another something that seemed to begin wholly would flash across the horizon of his reflections, like a ray of sunshine. Okay, so there just needs to be some beats in there, and then I needed to figure out what he was trying to say. Now, let's start from the very top. There's not that much, and it'll give us maybe a little more sense of cohesion. So we'll do that from right here. The weekend was over, and Begbie had returned to town, restless and strangely unhappy. There was within him a curious sense of something lost, and yet, now and then, the intimation of another something that seemed to begin wholly would flash across the horizon of his reflections, like a ray of sunshine attempting to penetrate a possible rift in the clouds. He unpacked his suitcase listlessly and compared its contents with the catalog of his weekend needs, which he always kept pasted on the inner side of the cover of his suitcase. Everything was there, from hairbrush to dinner coat, and yet that sense of something left behind still oppressed him. A second time he went over the list and compared it with his possessions, to find that nothing was missing. And then, on a sudden, there flashed across his mind a full realization of what the lost object was. "Ah!" he ejaculated with a deep sigh of relief. "That's it. I will write at once to my hostess. That's it. I will write at once to my hostess and ask her to return it. Action followed the resolution, and seating himself at his escritoire, Begbie wrote. Escritoire. French word, I believe. I'm not good at French. I don't know what that is. All right, we got one mistake in there, two mistakes in there. When I do this, I go right to left, right? I guess it would be latest in the recording to earliest, working backward, essentially. Just because the way it works is you're going to delete a part and you're going to move it back. And then you keep going backward, you find a piece. So like right here, we have here, it says, that's it. And right here, that's it. So we delete this part. Boom. And then make sure the cut's good. If I cut in the middle of a breath, it would sound really goofy. So he ejaculated with a deep sigh of relief. That's the one that means something different these days. That's it. Okay, right here. I have relief. That's it. I will write at once to my hostess and ask her to return it. There's a little click. This is where spectral is cool. I can see the noise here, but I don't see anything in the waveform. So there's just a little click. I don't know if from my mouth or me adjusting the clicker, the dog clicker in my hand, but there's just this little click here. And ask her to return it. Okay, so I'm just going to split that. We'll just kind of cut it away. Overlap, so we got a nice little crossfade. To return it. Action followed the resolution, and seating himself at his escritoire, Begbie wrote. I kind of emphasized escritoire, but you know what? They used the word and it's weird. I'm going to emphasize it. And then, on a sudden, there flashed across his mind a full realization of what the lost object was. I don't mind that. So what do we got here? On a sudden? Okay, so yeah. And then, on a sudden, I think I was reading ahead. When you're doing this, you're always reading a few words ahead. And my brain obviously was like, I don't know what we're trying to say here. So you can hear the hesitation in my voice. And then, on a sudden, they're flat. And like, I completely fell out of the character and then tried to regain it. Didn't sound good. So we're going to go right here, split and put that back. And we have a little breath. We want to make sure we don't double up that breath. Another thing that you can see in spectral that you can't see in a waveform, unless the waveform is like really zoomed in, which I don't really like mine way zoomed in. Defined that nothing was missing. And then, on a sudden, there flashed across his mind a full realization of what the lost object was. Cool. Aha. All right. That's all the clicks. I kind of liked the clicking and editing, so I'm going to keep doing that for the rest of this. We'll see how it goes. I felt like I was staying connected a little bit more. I might actually pick up right at action followed the resolution. So let's go through the first letter and see what we got. Action followed the resolution, and seating himself at his escritoire, Begbie wrote, The Mossmere, New York, August 1900. My dear Mrs. Shelton, upon my return from the never-to-be-forgotten series of golden hours at Seacliff, I find that, after the habit of the departing guest, I have left at least one of my possessions behind me. It is of value perhaps to nobody but myself, but poor as it is, I cannot very well do without it. It is my heart. If by some chance you have found it, and it is of no use to you, will you be good enough sometime soon, when you have nothing better to do, to return it to me? Or, if by some good fortune you find it worth retaining, will you please tell me so, that I may know it is there? Or, if by some good fortune you find it worth retaining, will you please tell me so, that I may... I don't like that. If by some good fortune you find it worth retaining, will you please tell me so, that I may know that it is in your custody and is not lying somewhere cold and neglected? It is the only one I have, and it has never passed out of my keeping before. Always devotedly yours, Harrison Begbie. Okay, made some mistakes, got some clicks in. Let's fix those. So in this case, I goofed up the same line twice because I didn't like how I was saying it. So what we've got is a double click, click, click on the second mistake. single click on the first mistake. So now we know a sequence of 1 click, then 2 clicks, 3 clicks, 4 clicks, and then an angry scream because you messed it up 4 times in a row. That's an indication that, like, this is all the same mistake. You can skip the stuff in the middle if you are convinced you didn't like those takes, or if you really were just stumbling over your words. Sometimes if it was a full take and not a pronunciation mistake, it's worth listening to, because you're your own worst critic. So maybe it was a decent take, and in your brain, you're just overly critical. So it's worth listening. But these were just straight up mistakes. So if we look, the time I got it right was this. If by some good fortune you find it worth... Okay, if by some good fortune. So we'll go here. I think it's this right here. That I may... Nope. Right here. Or, if by some good fortune you find it worth retaining. Okay, I did kind of like that. Let's listen to the beginning here. If by some good fortune you find it worth retaining, will you please... I think I like the first one, so I'm actually going to leave that out. So I'm going to put my split there, which is right at the will you please tell me so. Go back here. Will you please tell me so? Yeah, okay. And then I'm going to split right here at the start of the word. And then I got ripple editing turned on. So that just means when I delete this chunk, everything down the line is going to squeeze back in its place. Boom, just like that. So now we have to listen back and just make sure the timing's right. And then I can see a double breath. So there's the ending breath and the beginning breath. So will you please... I'm going to just get rid of that second breath. We're going to do overlap so we get a little bit of a crossfade. So one fades out while the other fades in, makes it smooth. Or, if by some good fortune you find it worth retaining, will you please tell me so, that I may know that... Now it sounds smooth all the way through. So that was a good, clean edit. So now we're into section 2. For these section markers, we'll leave a little extra time. There might be like a full 1.5 seconds, so it feels a little longer, just because you want some extra time in these, as you would with chapters and such. Anyone who's listened to an audiobook knows exactly what I'm talking about. So, moving on. 2. It was on the morning of the 2nd day after the mailing of this letter that Begbie found a dainty-hued missive lying beside his plate at the breakfast table. It was postmarked Seacliff, and addressed in the familiar handwriting of his hostess. Feverishly, he tore it open and found the following. Seacliff, August 1900. My dear Mr. Begbie, what careless creatures you men are! I have found 10 such articles as you describe in my house during the past 10 days, and out of so vast and varied a number, I cannot quite decide which one is yours. Some of them are badly cracked. Some of them are battered hopelessly. Only one of them is in what I should call an A1 first-class condition. I am hoping it is yours, but I do not know. In any event, on the receipt of this, won't you come down here at once, and we can run over them together. I will meet you with the motor on the arrival of the 12:15 at Wavecrest Station. Meanwhile, my dear Mr. Begbie, knowing how essential a part of the human mechanism a heart truly is, I send you mine to take the place of the other. You may keep it until your own is returned to you. Always sincerely, Mary Sheldon. P.S. Telegraph me if you will be on the 12:15. 3. 10 minutes later, the following rush message sped over the wires. New York, August 1900. Mrs. Shelton, Seacliff, Long Island. Let's say the words. Mrs. Shelton, Seacliff, Long Island. No. Mrs. Shelton. Okay. See? 4 mistakes, and then you go, That's how it works. All right. I got a mess here, so I'm just going to reset my brain, and let's go back to the start of section 3. I was like, I'm going to finish it. I'm not going to finish it. I can't do 2 sentences without a mistake, apparently. Okay, here we go. Let's just make sure I'm in the right spot. Beyond the 12:15. I haven't really listened to that. Telegraph me if you will beyond the 12:15. Beyond kind of almost sounds like I tried to say beyond and forgot the D. So I'm going to do this PS, and I'm going to punch and roll just so I can hear the end of it, kind of keep it the same. Phone is returned to you. Always sincerely, Mary Sheldon. P.S. Telegraph me if you will be on the 12:15. 3. 10 minutes later, the following rush message sped over the wires. New York, August 1900. Mrs. Shelton, Seacliff, L.I. Haven't time to wire you of arrival on 12:15. Am rushing to catch the 9:05. Harrison. All right, we finished it. Nice. That's nice and short. What does it got? 4-ish minutes of audio. No mistakes left in there, which is cool because we edited them as we went. I mean, we've done that in the past ones too with punch and roll, but hopefully these are good. It's nice and short, so there's not going to be a whole lot to edit. Would listen back one more time. Make sure all of my crossfades are clean and there's not double breaths. And then anywhere there's a long pause, like this area, I don't have a lot of room tone. Room tone is the sound of the area you're in. So if you could think of fans and stuff in the background, just or a hum of an HVAC system or something, that would be in your room tone. I don't have a lot. It's very quiet in my booth, so there's not a lot to pick up. So I would typically go through, especially at the front, or maybe even like a long crossfade, or a long fade in on these. And I would just make sure there's no extra noise in any of these. But apart from that, I don't know. I feel like I was pretty happy with that all the way through. Make sure my edits are all good and clean. And that would be that. So anyway, like I was saying about the script and the letters, I don't know if what I hear in my head is always what comes out when I'm doing these letters to people, or letters home, as I like to call them. But it's good to think that the inner monologue of a character writing a letter to someone would sound different than the dialogue of a character who is actually talking to the person. And it would probably sound different than the inner monologue to themselves. I feel like the inner monologue to yourself would be more of like a mumble, where the inner monologue of a letter writer would be more external sounding, right? Like the difference between my dear Mrs. Shelton, like, oh, that's it. I'll write it once to my hostess and return it. Like there's an inner dialogue versus like, because it says he ejaculated, like he exclaimed, you would be like, oh, that's it. Like he is actually saying this out loud. Like he came to the realization he's talking to himself. He might be alone in the room talking to himself, but that's different than like, oh, that's it. I'll write it once to my hostess and ask her to return it. Like you're talking to yourself internally. And then, dear Mrs. Shelton, upon my return from the never-to-be-forgotten series of golden hours at Seacliff, like that's different than if he was talking to her and be like, upon my return from the never-to-be-forgotten series of golden hours at Seacliff, I've found that after the habit of the departing guest, I've forgotten something. It's a little bit different, I think, at least in my brain. Let me know if you think it comes out different, or if you have any other ideas, or if you can remember any old commercials that have like a kid writing a letter home that might have created this idea in my head back when I was young, and now I can't get rid of it. So anyway, that's all for today. Nice and short. Let me know if there's anything you want to talk about further. Maybe we'll get into spectral editing and how I use that, especially for like editing pieces of dialogue together or pieces of narration together when I've made a mistake and I kind of like a little bit of both, or I want them to match up. I know it's weird. Sometimes it's not necessary. It's usually never necessary, but it's kind of fun to do. So maybe we'll do some spectral editing on the next one. But if there's anything else you can think of, let me know. Drop it in the comments, and we'll catch you in the next video.